You're listening to the Blue Raider Podcast, your number one resource for all the latest news, updates, and game recaps from Middle Tennessee athletics. Join us every Tuesday for our weekly interviews with players, coaches, and local media personalities alike. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe on all our socials. We're on Instagram, X, Twitter, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. If you're currently listening on your favorite streaming service, we also offer a visual presentation on YouTube at Blue Raider Podcast. Lastly, I'd love to hear your feedback, so don't forget to subscribe to GoMiddle.com to discuss this week's episodes along with the latest news and updates around Middle Tennessee. Welcome in to the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolton, and today is Tuesday, May 7th, and happy opening to May to all Blue Raider faithful out there. And today joining me is a continued guest and friend of the show is the MTSU Communications staff writer, Sam Doughton. Sam, how's it going?
Jake, thanks for having me back. Really excited to chat about all that's going on in Blue Raider athletics today as we're getting into the spring and starting to wrap things up and head from 2023-24 to 2024-25 here in Murfreesboro.
Absolutely, and wrapping up indeed this last weekend, we saw some programs kind of wrap up as far as our team sports go. We know we saw tennis their season end there in Starkville, and then we saw softball conclude their regular season, that is, with the home series of New Mexico State. But I guess the one that's kind of a hot topic is the men's tennis. I think there's nothing to really hang your head about. You go down to Mississippi State, undoubtedly you beat them here at your home place, and you're kind of upset about those kind of things because you think, well, this is a team you know you can beat. But much like other sports you see in basketball and football, home court advantage is still has an effect in tennis.
Absolutely, and I think it's very clear that Mississippi State team also improved substantially as the season went on, as the Blue Raiders really did as well. But they might have had just a little bit of a higher ceiling in general, just because of the talent that SEC teams can bring in from time to time. But this is really I think when you're in the season, and in particular when you have a program like the men's tennis program under Jimmy Borndam that's just had such a consistent level of success, it's almost like you don't really pay too much attention to it until they make postseason play and can they surpass it. But this is a really kind of a tricky needle to thread for Coach Jimmy and Coach Andrea Calagiana, Coach Callie, as we call him, this year, to sort of rebuild a roster that lost sort of that core three that was on all four of those previous CUSA title teams, and Stein Slom, Francisco Rocha, and Pavel Modal. They had to replace that core, and they had some good talent returning, Andre Horak and Marcel Kimbrowski in particular, along with Shu Matsuzaka. But getting a guy like Leo Rankin, getting a guy like Javier Corcho Ramos and Dimas all to come in. Really strong recruiting job in the portal by them, and really strong coaching job throughout the year to continue to get those guys to develop and improve and have a good team culture and get back to the second round again for the third year in a row. Not something you can say a lot at this level in men's tennis. And, if you watch that win over Georgia Tech on Friday, it was some extremely impressive tennis, particularly in doubles. Doubles was exceptionally dramatic. Middle won an entire break on court 2 to get the doubles point. And that sort of set them up really well when they got off to a good start on court 5 and court 6, and had a lot of success against the Yellow Jackets, and a good Yellow Jacket team this year. Came in ranked number 30, actually the higher seeded team in that pod compared to Middle. So little baby upset. Middle was sort of right there with them. They were number 37 entering the weekend. Probably going to raise up a little bit after that win, but exciting weekend still. I know Jimmy and the boys are disappointed because Sweet 16 was the goal this year. But I think, in a couple months, you're going to look back and continue to be impressed by the coaching job and the development job the players did. Credit the players as well for buying in and sticking with the program. And I think, the leaps you saw players make this year is pretty exceptional.
And their season, as collectively as a team, is over. But we've talked about how Jimmy was mentioning on our episode a few weeks ago how this is the first time in a while that the program has had not only the team make the tournament, but you get your singles and your doubles. And Leo, being as high ranked as he is, he'll be able to compete at the singles tournament. And then Leo and Andre will both, as a doubles pairing, will also be in the NCAA tournaments. And I have that starting in the singles event will start on May 20th. And I know the system a little bit better than I do as far as how that runs, because they're going to finish up their team play before they head on, and then collectively they'll be there at the same court, same time to do all their singles and doubles collectively at the end of May.
Yeah, that's generally the way it works. Is you got to wait for the team tournament to wrap up, and then everybody that's ranked at that point or made the tournament as an individual or as a doubles team all sort of goes to one site. It works kind of like the way, the major tournaments do for professional tennis. The US Open holds all of its tournaments, men's, women's, doubles, singles, juniors, all at the same time at the same location. Same thing with the NCAA tournament helps when you have guys like Leo that are in both draws to play together for sure. And excited for those guys. It's a big accomplishment. I think getting ranked in professional tennis is hard. Getting ranked in college tennis might be even harder given the number of people in the field, and just having a number next to your name on the score sheet is quite an accomplishment. And getting in the field, and Leo's got a good shot. Leo did really well in the fall. He lost his first round match, but did really well sort of in the consolation draw, made it to the finals there after losing his opener. So, if he gets a good draw early, I think I like his chances to make some noise, particularly in the singles draw.
Absolutely. Him and Horak both as a doubles pairing, too. They kind of got hot there late in the year. They were never ranked as high as they were as they finished out. I'm not sure their streak. I want to say it was maybe 4 or 5 straight matches. At least they got to finish, completed finishes that they brought up a win for them, minus what happened in Mississippi State. So a really good pairing there. So really excited to keep tabs on those guys as they move there into late May. And the other sport that wrapped up this week, as I spoke about at the top, was the softball team. Really, I don't want to spend too much time on the topic of softball. I think it's a disappointing finish, and I know that Coach Breeden is pretty honest about his performance, and he would say the same about his squad. It's just I think the way I sum it up when I did my midseason update was just they missed the timely hits. And I know that you've spoken too about how the pitching hasn't quite always been there for him. I still think at times it was good enough. But when you finish your season on such a high that is, one game away from making the super regionals, and then you have a Cinderella run, and then you come back and you're rated in the top 3 of your conference, and then you fall all the way down to the bottom 3 and don't make your conference tournament. It's kind of disheartening, but a lot happened this year. They graduate a lot, but I know that he's pretty high on what's to come as far as recruiting goes. So don't want to spend too much, but I'm disappointed on the finish. But there's still a lot to be said about what's to come for the Lady Raider softball.
Well, Jake, as you well know, those diamond sports, have some luck components to it. And when you lose as many sort of 1-run, 2-run games that they have this year, it can't. It's really frustrating at the end of the year because you felt like you let a lot of opportunities slip away, and they'll tell you that in the first place. They just miss too many chances to win games to get that timely hit, and they're going to have to come back with some aplomb. Some positives for this year. They did set a program record for home runs for the entire team, so that suggests sort of Bryce Brent's coming out as the hitting coach has brought some extra power to the team. And like you said, I know they're excited about what they've got going sort of in the prep and the JUCO ranks coming in next year. And so that leaves you some positives to build on, but you do lose a lot off of this year's squad and a lot of that core that was a big part of the NCAA tournament run a season ago. But, some stuff to build on still. I think Ansley Blevins and Ava Tepe, should they both be back, are going to continue to develop and have better years like they had this year. A lot of growth from both of them. And, they're particularly excited about the pitching prospects they have coming in, I'm sure, which is going to be a huge area to rebuild with your number one, Cameron Karsich. Second year in a row, your number one's leaving. So a lot to work on over there. Blue Raider softball field just missed out on the conference tournament, but hopefully brighter days ahead because I think they feel like they found something developmentally that can help them as they get new talent in.
Absolutely. And on the other diamond, we got baseball, who had an actual winning series on the road in New York against Binghamton, avenge that sweep that they had earlier in the year here in Murfreesboro, and they seem to be trending upward, and that's a very good sign. And we talk about missing the tournament. Baseball, luckily, only the 9th seed, the last place team will miss the conference tournament, but MTSU is on the brink there, and they have a huge opportunity to kind of secure that 8th seed moving into the conference tournament with the series on the road in Jacksonville against Jacksonville State. As they sit right now, it's only a 1-game buffer between them and the Gamecocks. So as they need to win at least 2 there to feel really comfortable, because they'll have a final series at home against Dallas Baptist, and then Jacksonville State will go on the road against Sam Houston State. So there's a lot that could come down to in these last 2 weekends, but I think the Raiders hold their own destiny with a matchup with the Gamecocks this upcoming weekend.
Absolutely, Jake. They come into the series with a 1-game lead on the Gamecocks, and if they get the sweep, I think it would be close to impossible. I think it is impossible for the Gamecocks to catch them in the final weekend. So obviously that's going to be the goal to win all the games. But even if you come out with just a winning series, at that point you're 2 games up and you hold the tiebreaker over them. So you're still sitting in pretty good shape to make the conference tournament. And obviously, we don't want to be a situation where we're counting numbers just to make the conference tournament this time of year. But, given the developmental arc of this team that's been pretty young, particularly on the pitching staff, they have started playing better late in the season, particularly on the mound. And I think that's given them some positive momentum here. Really good week this past week, if you conclude the midweek game against North Alabama on Jimmy Buffett night, which I was excited to attend as a fan. They're 3-1 this week and have continued to show a lot of power. It's, I think 66 home runs so far this year. It's one of our best seasons in the post BB core era for baseball. So good job, Kevin Nichols, on the power front. And hitting's been pretty consistent all year. It's just been getting the arms to go along with them. And some young guys are finally starting to show sort of that growth in their last few outings. And I think that leaves you not only optimistic for the end of the season, but giving you a chance to build on sort of a core heading into next year.
Yeah, and you touched on it. The biggest headache for him thus far was the bullpen. Really, your starters gave you enough to work with, but even if they had those early early inning blowups, you had to fall back on a bullpen that just wasn't consistent for you. And they're playing their best ball right now, so it seems. As you said, win over North Alabama. They avenged that loss in Binghamton, and I was impressed at the fact because they were run ruled by Binghamton here in Murfreesboro. So the ability to hold them to single digits, I think, says something. And on the road, going to New York is no easy trip. So you're still on the road. They got a game tonight as we release this against Lipscomb, and then they have that series against Jacksonville State. They haven't been home in a long while, so maybe sometimes staying away from home, if that's where you find your groove, things can turn around for you. And if the bullpen's doing well in that setting, as in being away from home, then more power to them. And like I said, no series is bigger than this one upcoming for them. But I'm curious to know, as we've talked about what softball was able to do last year in their little situation. With baseball, if they're able to slide into that conference tournament, you're unfortunately going to be put on the same side of the bracket as the number one seed, whoever that is. If that's going to be Dallas Baptist or Louisiana Tech, and Western Kentucky could potentially slip up in there. But I think most people can speculate what the answer to this question is going to be before you answer. But what is it going to take for them to make some sort of move in the conference tournament, much like we saw last year?
Well, what went well in the conference tournament from last year is they got aggressive with their pitching. It helped when you had 2 MLB draft picks on your staff, and Jaden Ham, who's had an unbelievable start to his professional career with the Tigers this year. I think he's got an ERA under 2 and high A ball for the Tigers right now. His changeup, baseball is my favorite sport, so I'm reading MLB prospect stuff, pretty regularly. And Jaden Ham's name is the name that keeps popping up that I'm excited to see. But when you have Ham and Swan, and you had a guy like James Sells that was hot at the end of the year last year, they sort of just use those 3 pitchers whenever they needed to, sort of in that regional into super regional type format that they use in the conference tournament, where you sort of have 2 4-team brackets that operate like a regional does, and you sort of go into a winner take all super regional game for the championship. Getting aggressive with the pitching, they've got 4 to 5 guys that they like. And if they just use those 4 to 5 guys sort of in 2 to 3 inning spurts across, games that are competitive, they could get themselves in postseason play if they just get a few timely hits. I mean, the bats are good enough that they can hit anybody in the league. They've proven that so far. And if they, maybe those shorter bursts for pitchers, can lead to more success and roll the dice a little bit sort of at the end of the year. So, sort of replicating what they did last year. I think, that their pitching talent's obviously not as high end as Ham and Swan was last year, but maybe a little deeper, where they have, Colin Kerrigan's had a really good end of the year, sort of as a lefty specialist out of the pen. Ollie Aikens has come along quite nicely in the past few weeks. So they've got some guys that they feel some affinity with at this point. And, when you have Trace Phillips, who can start a game as a DH and then come in to pitch and then stay in as a DH after he leaves pitching, you open up some interesting possibilities. So just got to hope the arms are hot. And I think Jerry's got the ability to be aggressive in those postseason situations and make best use of his staff that you really can't necessarily do in the regular season.
Right. You can get a little wacky when it comes to the conference tournament and what you do with the bullpen, because your season ends there. You're not necessarily, sometimes it's a feast or famine situation. You're throwing the kitchen sink out there. You can go an opener, you can do all that kind of crazy stuff. So you look forward to that. You talk about being MLB prospects. I'm curious, where does Briggs Rudder kind of fall on that scale? Is he a guy that we could see leave this coming up summer?
Oh, Briggs will definitely get a stint somewhere in pro ball, in my opinion. The downsides to him is that he's a little old, obviously for his position, and sort of where he's drafted, which tends to hurt guys. Draftability sometimes. Tricky to get a major bonus because obviously the money's a way to get a guy out of college that might want to come back. But Briggs has graduated, and the way he's hitting the ball, he's going to get a chance somewhere. Same way Jeremiah Boyd did sort of last year. But he'll get a shot. I'm not really sure what his position is at the next level. I'm not sure he's quite as strong defensively at catcher as he need to be professionally. Certainly a good college catcher, no question about it. But it's a different level of what they look for, sort of in those pro prospects at catching positions. And so sort of where does he fit defensively? But when you got a bat like that, you're going to get a shot somewhere, and
Right.
they'll figure out the defensive part later. So I think he's got a good chance. I just don't know sort of where he fits draft wise. He'll definitely get a chance to play somewhere. I just don't know if it's undrafted free agent or late round pick.
Right. You put it well though. If you can swing the bat, teams will always find a way to fit you on there somewhere, somehow. He can play first, he could play right field. So exciting prospect, and he's swung it well this year, and he's hot right now. So but we'll turn our attention on to our fall and winter sports right now. It's been an exciting spring in the recruiting aspect, as well as the transfer portal and all that big stuff. And there's so much to talk about. But the one that was fresh is football. We just had the spring game a couple weeks ago. You were there. What did you see from the football program there in their spring game?
Well, I hate to just quote Austin Lewis from when you had him on right after the spring game, but I think he was entirely correct that the main takeaway is that everything got installed and looks cohesive. It looks like everyone knew what they were doing, and that's easier said than done when you've got so many new faces, both on the coaching staff and in the locker room with the players. And you're installing a system that stylistically is very different on both sides of the ball than what you used to run. Now, I think both coordinators have adjusted to sort of the personnel they have to make better use of it. I think that Bodie Reeder's offense had a lot more sort of spread concepts to it than I was anticipating, and same thing with Coach Stewart's defensive unit made better use, I think, of sort of the edge guys that he had on the roster, sort of using them in unusual ways. Playing guys that are listed at defensive end as an outside linebacker, sort of in his 3-4 hybrid kind of system, 3-4 multiple kind of look. But that was what impressed me. Is it seemed like the scheme was solid and that the players understood what they were doing, and there were some things to like on both sides of the ball stylistically that I think are going to be fun to watch in Floyd Stadium and really effective in Conference USA play.
The transfer portal is kind of something a lot of teams will eye, especially at the mid-major level, because you might see some of those top names slip. But I think for the most part, the portal's already closed at this juncture, and all your ones are still here, so you feel really good about that. It's about those depth pieces. Is there any area that you think? I know we picked up an offensive tackle in Marcus Miller from UNLV this last week, which is a good get. I don't know that if he's a depth piece he has playing experience at the Division I level. If he's going to fit in there, they just have a lot of size up front. So I think it's a matter of competition. I don't know if Mason is comfortable or Bodie Reeder's comfortable with where he's at the tackle position. But that's kind of a topic of discussion too, is what the offensive line is. But is there any other areas that you think that they should bolster with the transfer portal over the summer?
I think the unfortunate part for them is that the areas that they really need to bolster are the two hardest areas to bolster, which is offensive and defensive line. Because basically anybody that enters the portal that has Division I starting level experience, a P5 is going to give a look at them and see if they can play. Because those, getting players that have sort of the size to play at the upper levels is so difficult. I mean, you saw it. Colorado's been in the news a lot this year, sort of with their transfer portal cycle and everything, and they learned how difficult it was to sort of rebuild the trenches from scratch last year. And, on the offensive line, we did have some good returning pieces, and they brought in some good pieces that got here this spring. But, they still need more depth, and the defensive line in particular needs a lot more depth, I think. And I'm not sure the portal is going to be their best place to find it. I would anticipate they're going to look heavily at the JUCOs probably to bring in some more depth in the trenches. I know I've seen several offers out for some junior college guys. But beyond that, I think they're looking to add more tight ends and get that room, have a little bit more depth. TK Sudorf and Holden Willis, I think, are both strong in that position and give you a good base along with Jacob Coleman. to start with. But they got some converted linebackers that are sitting second on the depth chart if they go into 12 personnel. So getting some more depth there, I think, is key on the offensive side of the ball. And then, defensively, I think they feel pretty good about their safeties, but it wouldn't hurt to get another cornerback or two, particularly given, they let a couple cornerbacks left to the transfer portal this offseason. So you're down a little depth there. But thankfully, skill guys are a little easier to find in the portal and in the trenches. So got some chances there. Probably wouldn't hurt to bring another linebacker or two, just that's a little bit better fit for sort of that 3-4 that Stewart wants. But I think, as you said, the starters in a lot of spots are pretty settled. And that leaves, finding the right pieces. You're probably going to have better success finding JUCO guys than portal guys a lot of times right now.
And tell me a little bit about the quarterback position. I know we know Vadiato is going to be the one. I think what we saw there at the spring game was interesting, where we have Roman and you have Luther kind of taking reps there for the second team. But we see DJ Riles leave, and then we pick up someone in the portal this last week at the quarterback position. They had some offers out there, so I don't think that he's looking to find a new starting quarterback, and that's not really what I'm speculating at all. But it's kind of a comfort thing with Mason, and as I assume with most coaches, to kind of have a quarterback at all experience in grade levels, or I should say class levels. And is that kind of what we see with these quarterback offers going out?
I mean, well, lest we forget how Nick Vadiato first came on our radar. He came on our radar in a season where Bailey Hockman, left the team, and then Chase Cunningham tore his ACL, and all of a sudden you had 4 scholarship quarterbacks, and now you're down to 2. Mm-hmm. And they sort of platooned Nick and Mike DeLello that 2021 season, got him to a Bahamas Bowl, won the Bahamas Bowl. Nick was Bahamas Bowl MVP. That's how Nick Vadiato came on the scene initially with Middle Tennessee football. Mm-hmm. And he got the full keys, to himself last year. But it wasn't that long ago. We needed all 4 scholarship quarterbacks. And so when you have guys like Kyle Lowe and DJ Riles leave, probably looking to get playing time, knowing that Nick's the guys going forward, and it looks, Luther and Roman both had strong springs from the sound of things. You still need a 4th scholarship guy that you like, because in an ideal world, Roman's probably redshirting this season as a true freshman, continuing to learn, get in the weight room, get stronger. And Luther's, probably coming into camp as the backup. But you need some competition for Luther, and really Luther and whoever they brought in is going to be competition for Nick as well. Nick's still got to hold on to that position. He's definitely in firm control of it. But, Coach Mason's all about competing every day. That sort of blue collar mentality, and he's not just going to give it to a quarterback that's earned it at this point. It's going to have to continue to be earned every day. But I think it's more they need 4 guys they trust, because you never know when you're going to need that 4th guy, as we did a couple of years ago.
Well, where do you think they sit right now in Conference USA? I know the transfer portal rankings, and they're always so subjective. You give guys 3 stars, and then they'll add a star to them when they get to college, and they lose stars when they get to JUCO, whatever it is. But I know if using the objectivity that is of 24/7 and Rivals, they put MTSU kind of in the middle of the pack in regards to just the transfer portal. They were already a middle of the pack, bottom middle of the pack in Conference USA last year. All that to come together, do you kind of see that still being true, that they're going to be kind of that 4th, 5th place team in Conference USA this year?
Yeah, I mean, I still think, if they get to 6 wins this year, everyone's going to be really excited about, the growth the teams had and the growth that individual players had. And, there certainly is a ceiling above that. I think they have upgraded talent in a lot of places, particularly, at skill positions out wide. They've gotten some more high-end talent there that's helped them out, and helped the addition of help on the offensive line has helped the running game out substantially that we saw in the spring. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. For me, it's just hard to get a read, because there's a lot of guys that are finishing up their degrees or their classes in the spring, that the transfers coming in the summer. There's still more recruiting to do, and so the team's still not fully formed yet. And I think it'll really be till the end of fall camp that we really get a good barometer of sort of where certain positions stack up to where they were before. But I think middle of the pack's a reasonable expectation. And like I said, I think 6 wins would be a really solid start to the Derek Mason era in Middle Tennessee. And I assure you the program probably internally feels like they can do better than that. But I think just being reasonable with where the program was and where they're going, getting to a bowl would be an excellent start for everybody.
Absolutely, and it's brutal. That schedule in general is just absolutely brutal. You start, in the middle of an already tough non-conference. You got Western Kentucky thrown in there. I still feel a level of confidence. I think Western's got you beat. I think Liberty's got you beat. it's kind of where you fall with the rest of them. And I think one thing that not only you say 6 wins, and I think that is a good milestone to be. I mean, I'd be ecstatic if they made it to a bowl game this year, given the circumstances that they faced, having picked up a coach probably later than you rather would have liked. You're going to lose bodies naturally through the transfer portal. But if you find a way to not to be competitive in your Liberty and Western Kentucky games, find a way to be competitive in those middling games with like Louisiana Tech, Jacksonville State, who seems to be set in their ways this year. They seem to be recouping a lot of that talent. But if you're better than the Kennesaw States, the Sam Houston States, New Mexico State seems to be falling off the map with the changing of coaches and all their players going to Vanderbilt. So, but if you're finding a way to be competitive in those 4 or 5 games, I think that would be more promising. Maybe less. I know a lot of people want to see the win-loss record, but if you're just competitive in your own conference, you give people a run for their money, and don't look as Western, rightfully so, has called us for so long, as Little Middle. If you find a way to get to lose that moniker, kind of prove your worth in the conference and prove that you're just one season away from being a contender once again.
Well, stylistically, the changes they've made to be more downhill running is going to lead to them being more competitive, because you think it's going to be a little bit more time of possession, a little bit more control of the clock. And so I think they'll be in a lot of games late, particularly in conference play. I think sort of the wild card is I'm interested how UTEP has changed under Scotty Walden, who is sort of the other major change coaching wise in Conference USA this year. I feel pretty confident Middle is going to be, competitive against La Tech, competitive against Jacksonville State, competitive against FIU. And so if you can win all 3 of those and throw in a Kennesaw team that's going to be transitioning up, that's sort of a chance for 4 wins right there. And then sort of, assuming you win Tennessee Tech, then you got to find number 6 somewhere else. And who is that number 6? Is it UTEP? Is it, do you sneak a rivalry game over Western Kentucky? It's a lot harder to find, a number 6 game that you feel confident on paper, so far. Hopefully, like I said, the fall camp gives us some more confidence heading in. And, I think they've had a very successful spring. I think, they've done everything they needed to do, but it's not, there's no rip the Band-Aid off. Like, they're going to have to build this, from a foundation that was strong, but it's like the SAPC, they're building the columns right now. And they got to sort of build the rest of it around there. And it might be next year when that's all done, but it's more likely going to be the year after that we sort of see the full fruition of sort of what Derek Mason's plan is to get the program back where he expects to be.
Beautifully put. I love throwing in the SAPC there to describe what's going on there with the roster and the team there. But other teams that had a really good spring is basketball. I know, again, talk about disappointing teams. We talked about softball, but gosh, the basketball team, you kind of hanging your head low when you see Justin enter the portal. You hang your head low when you see Jared Coleman-Jones, your 2 top performers a season ago, hit the road, and you're kind of like, gosh, we had a rough year. How much worse are we going to be next year? And I think we got a lot of added help. Some of them are question marks. Some of them are proven ball players at the mid-major level that you should be really, really excited about. And I know I've spoken on them a ton as those commitments have rolled through, but I think the names that pop out to me, and I'm interested to hear your take on where these guys fit in the current roster makeup here in the beginning of May, because you're going to go through your summer. You're going to, and I'm sure they're going to have some sort of in-game reps with these guys as we see every summer. But with the additions of Alec Oglesby and Isam Mustafa, those are guys that I think are instant starters in the starting 5 for you. That are, again, those are the guys that I allude to as proven scorers from a season ago. Mustafa wasn't a double-digit scorer, as I said, is kind of their big issue, but we saw what he was capable of doing for 3 years on a consistent basis at Coastal Carolina. He's a walking double-double in a league like the Sun Belt. I would imagine his physical style of play is going to translate really, really well. He's going to be a lot like a Jared in the fact that he's going to be slightly undersized, but gosh, he's going to get it, and he's going to fight for every single rebound, especially offensively. I mean, he was top 20, top 15 in the country his last year at Coastal Carolina in offensive rebounding per game. So a guy that I'm really excited about, Mustafa, and his presence down low, and then Oglesby is his scoring production at Stetson a year ago kind of led the Hatters to the NCAA tournament. So I'm impressed. I thought, if you had asked me about a month ago where we were at, I thought this team is going to get even worse. And that's to say that a lot of people are upset with McDevitt and his production. And, Massaro sent that email out then saying, hang with us. We're going to have a huge spring. And for the most part, I know people may not a lot of people are pessimistic about it, but to be quite honest and fair with everybody, he's had a great spring, and we're still looking to add a few more. So, Sam, what are kind of your thoughts of what you've seen from him in this portal class that we should be excited about?
Jake, I think you hit the nail on the head that there's been some impressive work done on the transfer portal trail, getting the guys that they've brought in so far, on board. We'll start with Mustafa, who I think is the clear surefire winner here, not just for, who he is, as you said, is sort of a walking double-double at our level, but he was not a bad player for TCU last year.
Right.
He like his per 40 numbers, per 32 numbers at TCU are excellent. Like if he played the full time that he played at Coastal Carolina for the Horned Frogs, his numbers would be very comparable. If you look at sort of his rate minutes, I mean, he shot 63% from the floor last year for the Horned Frogs. So it was there's some reasons perhaps he was limited there. Maybe there were other guys on bigger NIL deals that were of similar talent to him that got a chance to play a little more than he did. But he's somebody whose talent hasn't gone anywhere, and he's somebody that we know can produce at our level and is going to I think be an extra contributor right away. And more importantly, it gives Chris Luke a chance to continue to develop off the bench and have a little bit bigger role without him having to sort of take on the starting job right away, which I think long-term is going to be great for Chris and great for the team. Alec Oglesby obviously is a guy you can plug and play right now with the two. He's going to have great size for this level, great shooting ability, runs a lot of the same type of stuff that like Josh Jefferson ran when he was coming in from Wisconsin Green Bay. And so you really see how that could easily fit into what, the McDevitt era Blue Raiders like to do offensively. Again, somebody you plug and play instantly. I'm really excited sort of about the wings that they brought in, Jared Hall and Kamari Lands. I think both of them are intriguing, toolsy guys for different reasons. Jared Hall is obviously a local kid that had a lot of success locally at the prep level. And has some good physical traits that, I think Nick's system, when he's got the depth he has, where they like to press a lot and like to get out and transition more than they did last year, are going to play into Jared's strengths right now as a player. And as he continues to develop sort of a more refined offensive game. And then Kamari Lands. I mean, Kamari Lands is probably the highest touted, prospect we've had as far as what he was as a prep player since, the late Kermit Davis era, as far as, where he was ranked as a prep player. And sort of in that vein, if one thing I heard, from the staff sort of talking around the office is if you look at what Nick King's numbers were at Arkansas the year before he transferred to Memphis and then later transferred to Middle Tennessee, look at what Ja'Cory Williams' numbers were at Arkansas before he transferred to Middle Tennessee. They're very similar to what Kamari Lands' were at Arizona State and at Louisville as far as, points per game, rebounds per game, shooting percentages. So obviously easier said than done to turn into particularly Nick King, who was a true All-American here. But, that gives you some optimism that his game might be able to translate a little bit better to sort of the level that Middle's at versus where he was in the P5 in particular. So really exciting stuff. And, don't want to leave out Jalen Counter, who I think is slotting in more of as the first guard off the bench, sort of in that Cam Weston role that he was in 2022. And when you have a guy that can score like that coming off the bench, I think that you make your second unit that much better, and it lets the Blue Raiders play that blitzing press style that they had a lot of success with the 2 years that the Knicks had a good run, since I've been here.
Right. And let me play a little bit of general manager there with that, because I'm glad you lead with the counter, or you end there with the counter subject. Where we fell this last year, and let's not make any bones about it, was the point guard position. Cam goes down, you have no true point guard on your bench. With a guy like Jalen Counter now coming off the bench, in the event that, heaven forbid, Weston tears another ACL, but let's say we're in foul trouble, like we would still, before the Counter commitment, we would still be in that same boat. We wouldn't have a point guard off the bench, so we'd be forcing again a shooting guard to play the one position. So I think Counter, not necessarily from a starting perspective, but just from a depth perspective, provides a whole new level of versatility to the lineup. And you already spoke on his scoring ability. He's a double-digit scorer, so he has great vision too, high assist numbers. His turnovers are a little high, but I think that was more of a verdict of being in a very bad program that was IUPUI. But yeah, collectively, and I said this at the end of the episode last week, is the team getting better with every commitment? And that's huge, because sometimes you see with mid-major programs, they may just be adding bodies, and they're just adding bodies. Again, talk about depth, but they're just adding bodies just for the sheer numbers sake of it. But all these guys kind of provide a level they provide something to the team that you didn't have prior to their being here. Like Oglesby, you touch on being the scorer you need there, the two. We don't know anything about Jalen Jordan. At least you might have some insight there, and if he decides to come back for another year.
I've been told that Jalen is not using his last year of eligibility,
okay,
so that he is done with college basketball. So
okay,
by my count, that leaves men's basketball with 2 scholarships remaining.
Okay.
As we talk, there might be someone commits tonight that I don't know about yet, but
Right.
we'll see.
Well, so that was kind of the number I had. I was if I were gonna, as a general manager here, that I would have operated that he's gone. So you got Oglesby, who's great there. The 2 is kind of a position that you could even see someone like Jalen Counter. He's more of a dribble drive. He can dribble shoot, but I say, and we learned this last year, going from a 1 to a 2 is a lot easier than going from a 2 to a 1. Especially a guy that has scoring ability, just much like Jalen Counter does. But Jared Hall is another guy that can shoot the ball well from a shooting guard position. Kamari Lands, we already know what he's capable of doing. Just hasn't quite got the rhythm in college that we saw in high school. And the same goes for both Jared Hall and for Kamari Lands. So there's a lot to be excited about them. And Mustafa, touched on him a ton there. So there's just so much that can be plugged and played as with, and I'm excited to see what the lineup transform. The way I have it right now, and you can kind of see where your head's at in regards to that lineup, though. But you got Weston at the 1, Oglesby the 2. Do we see Justin Buford back there at the 3? And then the other kind of question mark for me is Jacob Johnson. I think with Jacob Johnson at the 4 or the 3, wherever, it's kind of a Buford and Johnson are kind of guys that are movable pieces there at the 3-4. But Buford is kind of a guy that's proven himself as a starter. He's been a starter with Nick as long as he's been here. But Johnson's kind of a guy that, like, the scoring production isn't there, and it hasn't been there. And it's not something that McDevitt's kind of pushed the issue with. But the thing I always draw back to when I have a scouting report and what should be for teams going forward is that Western Kentucky game there in the semifinals of the Conference USA tournament. Plenty of film on guys sagging off Johnson on the three-point line by 10, 15 feet. They're doubling down low, if fact, tripling if he's out on the wing. So is Johnson kind of a guy that is in danger of losing his starting position now that you've got guys like Kamari Lands and Jared Hall?
No, I mean, no question, right? I mean, I think like it also, they've got 2 more slots to fill where you could get a bigger guy to be at the 4 than what's currently constructed. I mean, I think the thing with Jacob Johnson is that Jacob Johnson, whatever unit he's a part of on next year's team, whether it's the first unit or the second unit, is going to have more shooters around him than he did the previous year, or the ability to put more shooters around him than he did the previous year. So maybe he's not starting, but maybe he's still your first guy off the bench. Well, maybe he's coming in with another shooter that you can bring with him, either Lands or Hall, as you said. But so you can build around sort of that limitation of his skill set with the rest of the lineup around him. Maybe he plays more with Chris Loof because Chris Loof's got more of an outside shot than Mustafa has, sort of at the 5. So he becomes a more useful piece when you have more other pieces to put him with. Because he is an excellent defender. He's a great rebounder for his size. He does a lot of other little things well that Nick likes in his team, particularly in sort of that up-tempo sort of pressing system that they've run. So he's a player that I think will be able to use his abilities better. And in particular, he knows what that limitation of his game is. He's in the gym working on it because he knows that's something that he's going to have to show to other teams. Otherwise, they're going to do exactly what you said and sag off of him. So they're well aware of it, but he's somebody that I think, could have a better year next year, given the way the roster's constructed now compared to what it was a year ago. Because, last year, you sort of had guys like Ozell and Ty Mosley that, did not have the shooting production in Ty's case that we expected, or in Ozell's case that we know he didn't have. You couldn't play Ozell and Jacob together. So now you've got more shooting options, and that's going to help a player like Jacob Johnson be more successful because other players can space where he doesn't have to.
Yeah, by virtue of competing for playing time, he's got to get better. I think that's obviously, and you said I'm sure he knows that's a glaring weak spot for him, but he does provide that sense of energy. He's a guy that's going to battle for the rebounds. He is kind of fearless when it comes to driving the ball. He doesn't have great finish at the rim, but he kind of has that level of his game. And I do agree when you talk about having shooters around him. It just that presence wasn't felt even with Justin in the game. You just don't have that presence on the floor this last year. So. All that said, you got 5 guys now. You still got 2 scholarship players with Jordan now saying that he's not coming back. What does this team turn back into contenders now that you've got Weston healthy?
I mean, I think that should be the expectation, right? I mean, that was the expectation heading into last year was that Weston's healthy. They were going to be contenders, and obviously it turned out that some of the depth pieces they had were not quite what they needed, even if Weston was going to be healthy last year. I think we can both agree on that. But I think the depth pieces are better this year. And if you have sort of that same core, I mean, obviously losing Jared hurts a lot, but I think Mustafa's, just as good, if not better, than Jared is as far as what they ask the five to do sort of in their system. You get Chris Luth to develop a little bit more. I mean, there's no reason to not be in that conversation, particularly given what Western and La Tech have lost this past
Mm-hmm.
year. And Sam Houston's going to bring a lot of talent back, but Sam Houston, I always felt was gettable.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't really a dominant one seed like we've seen in Conference USA in years past. So, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to be in that top of the conference conversation. A lot of work ahead to sort of gel that team together and get them to sort of work together. But I think on paper, a successful spring as they had, and that staff knew that this was a make or break year for them. No question, and it has put in a lot of work, and the players, know that everybody's sort of on the line this year, and you've seen that sense of urgency this offseason for sure.
Absolutely. And the conference itself, as you spoke on, your top two, Western and Louisiana Tech. Western losing their coach, losing a lot of guys to the portal. Louisiana Tech losing the Conference USA Player of the Year. And then Sam Houston there was on the verge of losing their top scorer in Lamar Wilkerson, but he has opted back into Sam Houston State. So they're gonna be a force this next season, not graduating very many. Liberty's another team that could certainly scare you, but I'm interested to see what the take is conference-wide with the media and the coaches poll that will come out, where they see MTSU. I think right now, they should be at least a top 3 team once again, barring injury, of course, is what we saw this last year. But I feel significantly better about where the men's basketball team is today on May 7th than where I felt on March 7th. So a lot to be excited about there. And to move on to the other basketball team, we got the Lady Raiders, and they've had a good – productive spring, not adding as many bodies as the men, but they hasn't been required of them. But when they did add pieces, they've been quality pieces. And I say that about Alina Enrique. She's a girl that prior to really the season ending, I was like, that's a player that I would love to add to our roster. I was lobbying for her the year before last, despite putting stuff on my own personal Twitter about how Malashka had put her in a blender there in the Conference USA tournament and saying that this is your defensive player of the year. But I'm excited about her presence at Murphy Center, especially now that Grabowski's gone. So she never withdrew. I thought for sure Yulia would have committed somewhere by now. I haven't seen anything. I know that she doesn't have a huge social media presence, but I'm sure whatever school she ends up on would be the huge get for them. And my assumption was Florida Atlantic, given the coaching staff down there. And I know that she's had coaches down there in the Boca Raton area, so I thought that was kind of her landing spot. But we haven't heard anything. But, of course, it's never too late for her to come back. But to go back to what their additions look like, you got Alina Enrique, Emily Monson, the Blackman High School alum that went to Purdue. A lot to be excited about her presence as a depth piece. I don't think she's going to be an immediate impact because she is a guard. She's a wing. You feel pretty good about Gregory and Scott where they are. So, but I say that about her being the depth piece. This is arguably the most talented team you've ever seen the Lady Raiders have. And that says a lot. You've had a lot of talented teams run through the Murphy Center. Coming off a top 25 season, you're receiving votes in the final AP poll. You make it to the round of 32 with an upset of Louisville, and you play a good 25 minutes against LSU. So, I mean, this team, are we still going to see them playing 6-7 players like we're accustomed to with Rick Insell? I have to say that this is the most talented team we've ever seen top to bottom. He's going to force the issue here. I feel like he's got to play more than 6-7 girls. What are your thoughts?
I would like to see him use the depth that he has, because I think that he and his staff have really done a nice job building up depth where maybe there wasn't as much depth last year. I think really the only position right now that's not as deep as it was a year ago is probably the 5. And that's just more because Grabowski wanted to get in the portal to get more playing time. I've heard that her commit to somewhere other than middle is pretty close to happening. So I think we'll hear news on that sooner rather than later. But they've improved all over the place, and they have a really good prep player coming in, Savannah Davis, that I know they've been excited about as well. So we can't forget about her. And you feel like you have 10 strong players going, but at the same time, Anastasia's going to get 30 minutes a night. Tamia's going to get 30 minutes a night. Joan's going to get 30 minutes a night. That's only 10 minutes of the 2, 3, and 5 that you have left potentially, and some nights are going to go 35 a lot of times. And it's if they get a veteran point guard, which is another position that I've heard is very likely to happen sooner rather than later, commitment-wise for Middle Tennessee. Matt Ansel talked about it Monday morning on WGNS radio on the sort of the weekly roundup that's coming pretty soon, and I can confirm that. So expect news on that sooner rather than later. That's another position where you feel confident, and old dog doesn't like to learn new tricks, Jake. And
Right.
Rick Insel's been in this game a long time, and won a lot more games than you or I have. So it's
Right.
hard for me to really question sort of that small bench that he's always seemed to run. But if you're ever going to do it, I think there's some reasons to do it this year. Jada Harrison's coming off a foot injury, and so you'd like her to develop and getting that veteran point guard in and having Jada play 10 minutes a night off the bench, 15 minutes a night off the bench is going to be good for her developmentally and good for the program long term. Emily Monson is a player that can play 2 through 4. I actually kind of see her a little like maybe her best spot on this team is sort of like doing what Courtney Whitson did at the 4 and sort of spreading the floor as more of a shooter at the 4, but being big enough to rebound, against, other 4s in Conference USA's. Conference USA is traditionally not a very big conference outside of the 5s in the post usually. So she'll probably have size on just about every 4 in our league, and she's going to have the speed and ability. And, one thing with her being a local kid, there's not been a day since she's committed I haven't seen her in the gym at the Murphy Center. She's already in there shooting and getting better on her own time, sort of voluntarily in sort of their off period. But, good on her. It's obviously, a short drive from her for wherever she's staying with her parents right now in town. But she's somebody that's committed and wants to get in and get better and compete right away. And she's got enough of a skill set and where she sort of slots on the roster where they're replacing, future Hall of Famer and Courtney Whitson. And she has some skill sets that's going to be appealing to the way that they like to run and use that position. Though when you have Arike and you sort of have these 2 really top post players, Arike is going to play a lot. But I think the biggest thing, Jake, is you can let your starting lineup play even more aggressive than they play defensively, even more intense defensively. Because if they get in foul trouble, cool, you got these guys, off the bench that you trust more now that can come in and play right away. And I think that's going to help everybody around the program. And like you said, I think it's going to make them a lot better. I'm just curious, sort of where that line is, sort of aggression wise. And it's probably going to take the summer and most of the preseason in the fall for them to sort out what they're comfortable with, sort of as a staff and as a team.
Right, and I always say I ask the question really about what they're going to do with that lineup, and I think you touch on it with the ability to have the depth pieces when you play aggressive defense, and which is scary to even think about when you have a team that was holding opponents to around that 50 points per game, like and those people now have the ability to play an even tougher level of defense because of those depth pieces behind them, makes this team even more scary. Jada Harrison is an exciting prospect. I think one thing that at least I hear about a lot on the forums is where does she stand coming in? Because she's been in the boot for a long time, and that has a right for concern. I understand that. I do think it was a process of she had an injury in high school that she was willing to forego that surgery until she got to college in lieu of getting a red shirt, and so all those things have played out. And you'd rather just be cautious. There's no need to progress that any faster than necessary because she just wasn't going to get the playing time this first year. So let's keep her in a boot as long as possible and hope that it heals well. And so I think you're worried about her conditioning level being out of basketball for so long. So that's why the addition of you saying about having the addition of a veteran point guard would be huge, because if there was any area that I thought that they would need to add, it would be the point guard position. And that's what I've been loading up there at the forum is these are the players, and I won't give away all my secrets or anything, but you go over on the forums over at Go Middle, you'll see my full list of players that are potentially there. And so those are, I just think that's the only area that you could see some growth. You could potentially add someone down low, but like you said, Monson's kind of a player that can do it all. And we saw that. What thing that's interesting about Monson, just by virtue of being able to see her play covering Murfreesboro high school sports, is she was a point guard in high school. She played a little bit of shooting guard as well because she played along with Ayanna Moore, who's at Vanderbilt. But she's very capable of handling the basketball. So I'm not saying that she's going to play the 1. That's not what I'm saying. But if she's a 4, she's going to be a better ball handler at the 4 than anyone else in Conference USA is at the 4. And I can say that with a pretty high level of confidence. She can. I mean, she was a 16-point per game on a perennial powerhouse high school basketball team. So there's a lot to say about what her abilities are at anywhere from the 2 all the way to the 4. So she adds a versatility to your roster. And again, the lineup is just top to bottom. You've got Davis, who is, as you talk about, she could be a question mark being an incoming freshman. I don't know that Insol's always very comfortable throwing in a freshman in there in her first season and making her run an offense. I imagine she'll get some limited playing time, but she has a shooting ability. I think a lot of people may have forgotten about Gracie Dodgen, another player in high school who could absolutely shoot the basketball, who had an unfortunate ACL injury a season ago, who has probably stunted her development that 1 year. But she's another girl that, again, with the depth in place, if the conditioning's there, she can shoot it. She can light it up just as good. I mean, if you forget, Savannah Davis broke Gracie Dodgen's 3-point record. So to have two 3-point record holding girls on roster, again, that's just spaces the floor. There's a lot to play around with. I think I'm a little bit too optimistic that we're going to see more than 7 girls play more than 15 minutes a night. But it's a good problem to have. And the only thing that always worries you is where does that fall in the transfer portal when it rolls around next year? Are girls upset? But I think the way the lineup is placed, and now if he's going to get a veteran point guard, you feel really good about where your classes line up because you've got a lot of your young depth pieces that we're really excited about, but they're also spearheaded by a lot older veteran players that they're gone. Hey, it's next girl up mentality. So you feel really good about the continuity of the program. You're not putting all your chips, all your eggs into one basket, if you will. You don't have a starting lineup of 5 seniors. So you feel really good about what's gonna come for this next season. And I say all that to say how good this team is, and I say it's the most talented team we've ever had. Do you see an opportunity for this team to finally break this like stigma of they're only a receiving votes team, they're only a fringe top 25 team? Do we kind of see them sneak into that? This is a for real powerhouse, much like we've seen with, say, Gonzaga on the men's side. Maybe not to the level of making Elite Eights, but to the fact of like these P5s have to respect MTSU.
Oh, I think they already respect the team. That's why most of them won't schedule them. If you talk to the coaching staff, it's it's understandable from their perspective. Their fan base doesn't know what Middle Tennessee women's basketball is, and so they see us lose to Middle, and it's a disaster. Where in reality, it's just like losing a conference game, to them really based on where our net and RPI are going to be, sort of year to year. But despite that, the coaching staff generally does a pretty good job of putting together a really tough schedule. And so I think a lot of that is going to depend on who we play in the sort of the non-conference slate next year, and how we do in that non-conference slate is how much respect this team's going to get. Because obviously, if you get some P5s on there and get some wins over them in those situations, in those MTE tournaments, sort of around Thanksgiving, in occasional road games that the program can get from time to time, people are going to pay attention, particularly depending on what type of Power 5 program it is. I understand Tennessee is on the schedule for next year as of right now. Obviously, any of that could change again. We're scheduled to go to Thompson Bowling this year. That's what the contract stated. But with the new coaching staff, obviously, there's always outs, as we well know. So I don't know, but that's a coach that's coming from Kim Caldwell's coming from a lower level and understands what those games mean and understands the quality that the Middle has. So would not surprise me if that stays for a multitude of reasons. And getting more games like that on the schedule, and as they've won NCAA tournament games and get sort of that prestige up, for lack of a better term, sort of the star rating in the old NCAA games. They went from maybe they were a 4-star program before, now they're a 5-star program or whatever, or 3 to a 4 or whatever it is. That helps perception wise when you win an NCAA tournament game. It's the same thing that Gonzaga women have done. Sort of on that side, they're getting more games now because they've won in the tournament. And so bringing that team in is only going to help them. And I think it's helpful for those other teams too, because they know they're going to get a really strong competitive game. And, when you got Anastasia Woldreva in the post, you can't tell me there's 10 better post players than her in the country right now.
Right.
That you can face on a 1-game basis and get ready for your conference play. So having individual players like that are as strong as she is, I think can help matters a lot when it comes to scheduling. So it's really good. But those polling things, you've got to get, a resume built up to get on those polls for a lot of times. And, occasionally you can luck into sort of like a Fairfield situation where they're just undefeated for so long and win so many games in a row that they get in that conversation. But it's easier to get some big teams on the schedule and get some wins. And this team's shown the ability to do it. And I think they've got a good team coming back next year that will have the ability to do it again.
Yeah, you read my mind with the question on UT if they're going to back out of that contract or not, because it feels like you have the opportunity, if you're UT's perspective, that like if there was a time to get out of it, you just lost. It probably arguably your best chance was the win last year. Granted, Rickea Jackson was non-existent. I mean, she was hurt in that game, so you probably feel like you might have stolen one from him in the grand series of it all. But now you've got a new coach, and as you say, Kim Caldwell would hopefully show some respect to the mid major because she understands, because her Marshall team didn't get the level of respect that she probably thought they deserved, only losing one game in the Sun Belt Conference regular season. So she could have used, a few more non-conference schedulees to boost her resume as well. And there's a lot of mid majors out there that I know MTSU, and I'm sure Matt and Rick will say this, they really try hard to get those names to come here, as we've seen in years past, and most of them do, and for the most part, they always regret it. So it's hard to find those teams, but I would love to see like a matchup with Florida Gulf Coast, another perennial mid-major. Gonzaga is kind of a far travel, but we saw them they were able to get something with St. Mary's, so it's not like it's out of the question of possibility, but Gonzaga would be kind of a cool one. And I know that Matt had reached out over via Twitter to face with Fairfield, and I don't know that Fairfield's going to have the same team with their coach leaving and all that stuff, but it's like you said, if they can get the resume, if they can get, I don't know that they've made an announcement much like they did with their trip to was it the Bahamas? No, they were in the Bahamas this last year where they played Michigan. Is that right? Yeah. So they haven't made an announcement for a preseason tournament like that, but that's another one that is a big resume booster for you. So it's all about what kind of tournament like that you can get yourself into, and then once you're there, capitalizing on that opportunity. Because again, if you're able to steal one from Michigan there, you feel really good about being in a top 25 team. That's a huge resume booster for you. And then you took care of business with Tennessee. So exciting to see, because that's kind of the other side of it. You got your roster now. What kind of respect is this team going to get? And it all comes down to who they're going to play. And I know that Rick is always had them ready, and same goes for Matt. So there's a lot to be excited about where the chips may fall for the Lady Raiders this upcoming winter.
Well, Jake, when I first applied to this job, little over 3 years ago now, it seems like, which is kind of wild to say, basketball was a big thing that attracted me to this job, and getting a chance to cover both these programs and sort of where they've gone and where they've been going have been fascinating stories to follow. And I think that it's two very different stories on both sides of where they're at. That's made my job exciting. I know it's made your job exciting as well, following that. And couldn't have put it any better myself. I think it's a really interesting crossroads sort of for both programs in very different ways this offseason, and they both put themselves in good positions to take the road that they need to next year for sure.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up all of our spring talk there, and we hit all the transfer portal with our fall and winter sports, our major ones there. Sam, the summer is coming on us quickly here. Well, what happens to a staff writer on the MTSU communications side around the summer?
Well, I have a mandatory 2-week vacation sort of at the start of June that
Poor guy.
A lot of us, yeah. I mean, it's, it is what it is. So you probably won't hear from me at all in the early part of June, but coming back out of that, we have some exciting things planned. The Blue Raider Blitz is coming up at the end of May. So a little bit of change in timeline today. We just announced that on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go into 5 spots this year with Coach Derek Mason. A great chance for fans to come out and meet him, get to know him a little bit better, and get season tickets and involved with the BRAA if that's something y'all would like to do. But since we're doing that earlier, that gives me more time in the summer to sort of help do some other things. I have my own podcast series planned, sort of doing similar to what the coaches check-in was last summer for those of you that tuned in for that. Except instead of talking with sort of our coaches about what their summer looks like, it's going to be talking more with support staff, learning more about what our staff nutritionist does. What do some of the people in the BRAA do? What do some people on the comm staff do? And trainers and strength coaches and everything in between. There's a lot of people that make a lot of college athletics possible, and I think it's important for people to hear those stories and really sort of see how those people make an impact, and sort of how they can help sort of make this whole thing run. So that's sort of where my summer content planning is. I do have a couple stories in the work. I'm working on a story on the sort of student workers that work on our TV production broadcast, sort of over in the School of Media and Media Production, they do a great job, and they have worked a ton of events for us this year. Just finished our last one with softball. Did some interviews with them when they were doing the conference tennis tournament, sort of about how, that was a challenge for them to shoot, and sort of shooting 8 matches at once at times, and sort of figuring out the storytelling aspect to that. But that feature should be out sooner rather than later. And then as NCAA College Football 25 video game talk ramps up, I am writing about how we sort of got the Blue Raiders into the game and some of the behind the scenes work that went into that on the sort of the licensing and asset size that we had to do, talk with the incomparable department about what their job is to make all that possible. And I think there's some interesting tidbits in there that fans will be excited to read about. So that's just a couple things that got in the pike. It's much less game coverage. So it's very different for me day to day, Jake. But it is exciting because I get to do some more long form and some more, evergreen type concepts that I think, are informative to people and are exciting and, keeps me busy when I don't have a game to go to every weekend.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing some of those pieces come across on GoBlueRaiders.com as well as your social media. Sam is quite too humble. He talks about all these pieces that make it all possible, but you're a big integral part of what we get on a game-to-game basis every week, again, with your notebook. Very, very insightful for me, as well as always your post-game write-ups. It's great stuff as always, and I appreciate you coming on. I know we'll look forward to you in the future, but before we sign off here, plug those social medias for those listening.
Well, as always, friends, you can find me on X. That's at SJ Doughton, DOUGHTON. Usually the best place to find me. But if you go on GoBlueRaiders.com, you can reach me at my email there, sam.doughton@mtsu.edu. Always welcome to have story ideas from people. With 12 teams on campus, there are stories that I miss all the time that maybe about specific players or other things that you think are worth pursuing. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Always like hearing ideas from people who read my stuff and are engaged with the athletic department. But love to highlight, players and coaches that maybe have, gone underappreciated at times, as sort of we get caught up in the day-to-day. So two best places to reach out for me. But most of my stuff, if you're looking just to read my stuff, find my Twitter or X profile, whichever you prefer to call it. You'll see almost everything that I write goes up there in some form or another. Absolutely.
He's a go-to source for the podcast. And if you listen to the podcast, you should know where a lot of that stuff insight comes from. So again, appreciate you, Sam. And for those that are listening, if you want to follow the show on our Twitter, Instagram at Blue Raider Pod, we are on TikTok as well at Blue Raider Pod. And of course, our visual presentation every week at the same time is on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, Blue Raider Podcast. We have a new and refreshed website, BlueRaiderPodcast.com. I've said that enough times already. So if you haven't had the opportunity, stop on by the website, give it a view. We do have some a soft opening of our store as well as potential partnerships with some NIL athletes. So a lot of exciting stuff happening for the Blue Raider Podcast as we continue to grow, get more listeners every week. So I appreciate you guys always sharing, liking, subscribing over on YouTube as well as your favorite streaming services. And until next week, fans, go Blue.